Chapter 1. Pancakes versus Waffles. The beginning. Elliot had never been the type to start fights online. Sure, he had opinions, strong ones even, but he usually kept them to himself, content with muttering insults at a screen like a normal person. But that all changed on a random Thursday night when he stumbled upon a YouTube video titled, Pancakes versus Waffles, the Ultimate Debate. It was supposed to be harmless background noise while he worked on his thesis, but then he made the mistake of scrolling through the comments. And there it was, a heinous, unforgivable opinion. Waffles are just pancakes with commitment issues. Elliot's eye twitched. He froze, staring at the words like they had personally offended him. After a long and dramatic pause, his hands moved quick and precise, like he was about to type a battle manifesto. Elliot writes, first of all, waffles have texture. They have structure. Waffle a divine balance of crispiness and fluff. Pancakes? Just a sad little disc of regret. Clown face. He hit send, satisfied with the venom in his tone. For a brief moment, silence. Peace. Maybe his brilliant argument had silenced the pancake heretic. But then, at Mark Loves Breakfast, wow, you must be fun at parties. Faced with tears of joy, waffles are just pancakes with holes in them. You're literally eating failure. Elliot narrowed his eyes, glaring at the screen like it had called him personally to insult his family. Elliot writes, oh, I am sorry. I didn't realize failure meant being able to hold syrup without turning into a soggy mess in under 2 seconds. Try again. Faced with rolling eyes. At Mark Loves Breakfast, pancakes are versatile. Have you ever tried a souffle pancake? Waffles wish they could be that elegant. Elliot's jaw dropped. Elliot writes, elegant? Dizzy face. If I wanted my breakfast to have an identity crisis, I would eat toast. It was the digital equivalent of a slap in the face. The argument raged on, spiraling into a mix of overly dramatic insults, emojis, and increasingly petty comparisons. At Mark Loves Breakfast, you're just mad because pancakes are for people with taste. Waffles are for children who want their breakfast to look like a Lego. Elliot writes, taste? Woozy face police. Pancakes are for people who peaked in middle school and still think wearing flip-flops everywhere is a personality trait. The exchanges became faster, more unhinged. Elliot should have been sleeping. He had work in the morning, but instead he was on his third cup of coffee, battling some pancake-loving stranger on the internet at 2 a.m. And, to his horror, it was kind of fun. Chapter 2. The Pancake Apocalypse continues. Elliot didn't expect to still be thinking about it the next day. Yet, as he stirred his coffee, staring blankly at his laptop screen, the argument replayed in his head like a bad soap opera. He tried to focus on his thesis, a very serious, very important piece of work about cognitive dissonance, but his brain kept screaming. Waffles are for children who want their breakfast to look like a Lego. Elliot scowled, stabbing the enter a little too hard. Who even was this guy? Mark Loves Breakfast. What kind of basic-ass username was that? And why did his insults get under Elliot's skin so much before he could talk himself out of it? He reopened the YouTube video, maybe to confirm Mark had moved on, maybe because he was feeling reckless. Either way, there it was. At Mark Loves Breakfast, by the way, souffle pancakes better than waffles. Just saying. Elliot's jaw dropped. This wasn't over. Hands shaking with righteous fury, he typed, Elliot writes, first of all, souffle pancakes are just pancakes wearing heels. Performing arts waffles don't need accessories to be iconic. At Mark Loves Breakfast, oh, so waffles are iconic now? You're really out here calling grid-shaped carbs revolutionary. Faced with tears of joy, Elliot's eye twitched. Elliot writes, revolutionary? Oh no, darling. Iconic. Legendary. Waffle sparkles and pancakes could never. At Mark Loves Breakfast, I will have you know, pancakes built breakfast culture. You're acting like waffles didn't come from pancakes in the first place. Elliot's brain short-circuited. Oh my God, he thinks pancakes invented waffles. The sheer audacity. Elliot writes, sweetheart, waffles didn't come from pancakes. If anything, pancakes are just waffles that gave up halfway. Lazy, soggy, flat messes. At Mark Loves Breakfast, Did you just call pancakes lazy? LMAO. Imagine thinking waffles require more effort. Press a button. Boom. Mediocrity. Yawning face at Elliot writes, oh, because flipping pancakes in a pan like a sad little peasant is better? Please. Waffles are sophisticated. Artisanal. Pancakes are the Crocs of breakfast food. You should stop. Close the browser. Move on. But the more they argued, the more it felt like this random internet stranger was actually insulting him. And the worst part, it wasn't just anger anymore. It was fun. At Mark Loves Breakfast, it's cute that you're trying so hard. I can respect that, even if you're wrong. Elliot's pulse jumped. At Elliot writes, cute? Don't patronize me. Middle finger. Waffles are a lifestyle. Pancakes are a mistake. At Mark Loves Breakfast, waffles are a cry for attention. Pancakes are humble, reliable. The breakfast you bring home to meet your parents. Elliot actually laughed. The audacity. For the next hour, the insults got pettier. The emojis got more aggressive. At one point, he accused pancakes of being flimsy corporate sellouts, while Mark called waffles overly structured egomaniacs. And somewhere around midnight, Elliot caught himself smiling. Chapter 3. Demons on the Internet. Mark really didn't have time for this. Between his diner shifts and barely keeping his freelance gigs afloat, his days were exhausting. His feet hurt, his bank account was embarrassing, and his boss refused to fix the damn air conditioning. And yet, between dodging Karen complaints and flipping burgers, he kept refreshing the comments section of that stupid video. He didn't even know why. Maybe it was the thrill of the argument. Maybe it was because Elliot writes was infuriating in a way that felt personal. And Mark Loves Breakfast. Waffles are just edible spreadsheets. Enjoy your grid mediocrity, I guess. Mark smirked, imagining the stranger on the other side sputtering in outrage. Then he saw the reply. At Elliot writes, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize soupy carbs that collapse under pressure were a personality trait. Face blowing a kiss. Mark choked on his pasta. Every reply was too precise, like they crafted insults for sport. Mark could almost hear their voice. High-pitched, exasperated, the kind of tone someone would use before storming out of Starbucks because their latte wasn't aesthetic enough. And for some reason, his brain had decided they were definitely a girl. Probably artsy, chaotic, and the kind of menace who wore combat boots with skirts. Bitched demon energy. At Mark Loves Breakfast, wow. You sound really passionate about waffles. You okay? Need a hug? Or therapy? At Elliot writes, coming from someone who probably cries over burnt pancakes. That's rich. Maybe focus on getting your life together before you come for me, sweetie. Nail polish. At Mark Loves Breakfast, bold of you to assume I don't have my life together. Unlike you, I can eat breakfast without an existential crisis. Mark sat back, smirking. Got him. But then, at Elliot writes, sure, Jane, real stable adult behavior, arguing with a stranger about waffles. Faced with tears of joy, Mark groaned, rubbing his face. They were impossible. Meanwhile, Elliot sat in his cluttered apartment, surrounded by empty coffee mugs and a thesis he was definitely ignoring. Instead of working, he was refreshing the YouTube comments. And because, for some godforsaken reason, this pancake-obsessed stranger was living rent-free in his head. At Elliot writes, tell me, Mark, is this the most exciting thing happening in your life? Are pancakes your whole personality? Yawning face. Elliot smirked, twirling a pen between his fingers. Mark's replies were sharp, condescending, and just infuriating enough to make Elliot want to both scream and laugh. And for some reason, Elliot had convinced himself that Mark was a middle-aged dad with a tragic obsession with griddle pans. At Mark Loves Breakfast, don't project. Waffle demon. Just admit pancakes are superior and we can move on. At Elliot writes, aw, look at you, still trying. Cute. Too bad you're wrong. Sparkling heart. He didn't notice the time passing. Didn't notice the work piling up. All he knew was he was enjoying himself. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't want it to end. Chapter 4. Sweet Dreams and Sour Realities. Months of freelancing, double shifts, and lost sleep had led to this. Mark had finally saved enough to leave his sleepy hometown and work at La Nouvelle Douceur. under the legendary Nina Loron. All right, Mark, he muttered, tightening his grip on his bag. Time to make it happen. Elliot, meanwhile, was spiraling. He sat cross-legged on Nina's plush rug, glaring at his laptop like it had personally wronged him. It was supposed to be an easy ghostwriting job, but today, every word felt like pulling teeth. Nina glanced up from her dough. You're staring at that screen like it owes you money. It does. Elliot groaned, flopping back dramatically. And dignity, and a reason to keep going. A little melodramatic. Don't you think? No. Elliot snapped, sitting up. I can't do this anymore. Nina, writing these awful books. It's like selling my soul, one tacky metaphor at a time. Nina wiped her hands, then stopped. Elliot blinked. What? If you hate it, stop. Write something else. Or don't write at all. You got options. Elliot stared at her. He hated when she was logical like this. Mark's first day at La Nouvelle Douceur was a blur of movement, heat, and orders. And then Nina Loron entered. She was small, but commanded attention with a kind of confidence that Mark could only dream of. You must be the new one, she said, arms crossed. Mark Reed, chef, he said, which earned him a flicker of approval. Let's see if he can keep up. By the end of the day, he was exhausted, covered in flour, and had been yelled at twice. But overall, he felt happy. As he wiped the counter, Nina handed him a croissant. Eat. You will need the energy. The buttery, flaky perfection melted in his mouth. And for a moment, the exhaustion didn't matter. This was where he was meant to be. The next morning, Elliot strolled into the bakery, an oversized cardigan draped over his shoulders. Ellie, Nina called, smirking. You're early. Feed me. And maybe I will forgive you for being smug yesterday. She nodded to the back. Help yourself. Just don't distract the new guy. New guy, Mark? He's good. Sharp. A little quiet. Elliot shrugged, stepping into the kitchen. Mark was too focused on plating tarts to notice him. Brows furrowed, hands precise. Elliot leaned against the doorframe. Nice plating. Mark startled, nearly dropping the tray. His eyes narrowed. Who are you? I am Elliot, a friend of Nina's. And you must be the new guy. Yes. Mark, he grunted. Elliot tilted his head. You're pretty intense for someone working with pastries. Mark scowled. And you're pretty nosy for someone who doesn't work here. Elliot laughed, unbothered. Mark's first impression? Bitchy demon energy. And yet, Mark couldn't quite look away. Chapter 5. She's perfect. Oh God, no, she's not. Mark loved routines. Morning jog, coffee, pastries, and a scroll through his favorite corner of YouTube. Predictable, grounding, a way to keep moving forward without thinking too hard about anything else. But the highlight of his day, reading Elliot Wright's comments. He would never admit it, but he admired her. Smart, snarky, sharp. She turned every debate into a verbal sparring match. And she always won. He imagined her as someone elegant and effortlessly cool. Way out of his league, leaning against the counter during his break. Mark scrolled to the latest argument under pancakes versus waffles, the ultimate debate. At Elliot Wright's, if you think pancakes are elegant, you probably think ketchup is spicy. Do better, darling. Blackheart sparkles. Mark chuckled. Of course, she roasted him again. It was borderline addictive. Lately, though, it felt personal, like she knew how to push his buttons. And he didn't even mind. Then everything changed. The bakery was quiet in the afternoon lull. Mark was in the kitchen, focused on his pot au choux, when chaos entered. Elliot, with a coffee in hand, leaning against the counter like he owned the place. Don't you have anywhere else to be? Mark muttered, refusing to look up. Not really, Elliot said, sipping dramatically. I could sit in the cafe and listen to bad indie music. But honestly, this is more fun. Mark exhaled. He didn't know why, but Elliot got under his skin. Maybe it was his disregard for personal space. Maybe it was how effortlessly he stole attention. Or maybe it was because he was annoyingly, stupidly attractive. Not that Mark was acknowledging that. Then Nina strolled by and said, "Oh hey, Mark loves breakfast," replied again. Mark froze. His piping bag slipped. Elliot barely reacted. Yeah, this guy's unhinged. Keeps defending pancakes like it's a personal crusade. Mark's heart stopped. His brain blanked, then rebooted at full speed. The comments. The sass. The unrelenting chaos energy. It was him. It was Elliot. Oh my God, Mark muttered. What? Elliot asked, oblivious, still scrolling. Mark swallowed, gripping the counter. He thought Elliot Wrights was some hot, mysterious girl he had spent months secretly crushing. No, nope, not happening. It's nothing, Mark said, voice strangled. But that night, staring at Elliot's latest comment, he groaned. He was in so much trouble. Chapter 6. Elliot quits, finally. Thank God. Elliot woke up with the kind of clarity usually reserved for protagonists in coming-of-age movies. He was done. Done with his PhD. Done pretending to care about contributing to academia or publishing research that only 3 desperate grad students would read. Done with citing sources in Chicago style. So, he quit. And honestly, he felt fantastic. Mostly, there was still the minor issue of telling his advisor. But that was future Elliot's problem. Present Elliot was busy basking in his newfound freedom. So, let me get this straight, Nina said, peering over her coffee. You actually quit? Yup. Elliot sprawled dramatically across her couch. Sent the email this morning. You emailed him? Her voice hit a pitch only dogs could hear. What did you say? Elliot, ever the dramatic bitch, pulled out his phone and read. Dear Dr. Benson, I regret to inform you I am withdrawing from the program. Thank you for your guidance. Best, Elliot. Nina stared. That's it? What? Should I have said? Academia has sucked the will to live out of me like a particularly aggressive dementor, and I would rather be poor than finish this degree? Yes, she said solemnly. That would have been iconic. Well, too late. Already sent. She shook her head, but looked mildly impressed. Now that you're free, enter a writing competition or something. Please. I don't need validation from strangers on the internet. First of all, yes you do. She poked his arm. Second, this one has prize money. And, validation. Elliot groaned, but relented. Fine. Send me the link. Meanwhile, Mark was acting weird. Not his usual awkward but endearing weird. No, this was something else. At the cafe, Elliot expected the usual. Mark smiling, making a dumb joke, sneaking him an extra espresso. Instead, Mark saw him and got visibly tensed. And then, this was the shocking part, turned his back like the espresso machine had become the most fascinating thing in existence. Morning? Elliot tried. Morning, Mark muttered, still facing the machine. You good? Yeah. Fine. Totally fine. He sounded like a man hiding a body. Then, just to make things weirder, Mark Loves Breakfast also ghosted him. Elliot refreshed their chat dramatically. Wow, I got ghosted in real life and online. Love that for me. Nina hummed. Maybe he's busy, or maybe, Elliot declared, he was abducted by aliens. Right? That's way more likely than him just having responsibilities. Elliot sighed. Whatever. I will enter this stupid contest and focus on me. Who needs emotionally available friends anyway? Now, that's the spirit. Nina deadpanned. Elliot smirked. Oh, I intend to. Chapter 7. Mark is having the worst day of his life. Mark had handled a lot of stressful situations in his life, be it exams, job interviews. That one time he accidentally liked a 4-year-old post on his ex's Instagram. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the catastrophe of today. Mark had been doing a phenomenal job at avoiding Elliot, the literal chaos demon. But then, Elliot had started an argument over the stupidest thing imaginable. The correct way to eat a croissant. After the initial resistance, he had finally shouted, "You just eat it, you demon. You don't need a strategy." And somehow, between Elliot's dramatic gesturing, the absolute audacity of his smug little smirk, and the way he kept leaning in just a little too close, Mark had almost kissed him. Well, a little more than almost. The moment had lasted a breath long enough for him to feel his own heartbeat hammering in his ears, for his eyes to flick down to Elliot's lips, for the world to tilt, before his brain slammed the panic button with all the force of a nuclear detonation. Now, he was sitting there, frozen, internally spiraling, while Elliot squinted at him suspiciously. What the hell was that? Elliot, asked. What was what? Mark croaked guiltily. You, Elliot waved a hand at him. You lurched. Like you were about to. His eyes widened. Wait, were you about to kiss me? No, Mark said far too quickly. His voice cracked like a teenager in a coming-of-age movie. Elliot stared at him, looking absurdly pleased with himself. Oh my God, you were. Mark needed to escape. Immediately. Unfortunately, his limbs were not cooperating. Elliot, the menace, leaned in. You've been acting weird all week. You're avoiding me. Panic flashed hot in Mark's chest. He scrambled to stand up, knocking over his coffee in the process. Elliot's eyes narrowed as realization dawned on him. Elliot's gaze dropped to Mark's t-shirt, and Mark felt a wave of sheer terror. Elliot's lips parted in silent horror. No. And Mark bolted. Of course, Elliot, the menace he was, chased after him. This was the worst day of his life. Chapter 8. Elliot is going to ruin Mark's life. The moment Elliot saw Mark's t-shirt, everything clicked into place like an unhinged game of Tetris. That stupid shirt. That exact stupid shirt, the one from Mark Loves Breakfast YouTube profile. The one Elliot had stared at for an embarrassing amount of time while watching his favorite videos. The one now physically existing on Mark's very real, very guilty-looking body. Elliot's brain short-circuited. He had spent 2 months texting Mark Loves Breakfast, oversharing, God help him, flirting, only to find out it had been Mark the whole time. At first, he thought about letting it all go. Elliot was not only a virgin, but also a complete failure when it came to relationships. After his parents' death and selling their home to clear the debt, he had no time for parties or making out with hot boys. He had spent those years working, studying, and scraping by. Romance had always been a distant, ridiculous dream, something he wrote about, not something he lived. But Mark, who always texted him back. Mark, who laughed at his dumbest jokes. Mark, who understood the loneliness Elliot never said out loud. Elliot clenched his jaw. Absolutely not. This required immediate action. He yanked out his phone and called Mark. Straight to voicemail. He shoved his feet into his shoes, grabbed his jacket, and stormed out the door like a man on a mission. 15 minutes later, he was pounding on Mark's apartment door. Open up. Elliot called. You owe me an explanation. You sneaky little liar. Silence. Mark, I know you're in there. You're probably hiding under a blanket, breathing dramatically into your hands. Open this door. Or do you want me to sing Baby Shark until your neighbors call the cops? A long pause. Then, finally, the sound of the lock clicking open. Mark appeared in the doorway, looking miserable. What do you want? Elliot pushed past him and flopped onto the couch. You, me, a movie. Now, Mark groaned. But why? Because I need to process this emotional betrayal, and I do my best thinking when I'm annoying you. Mark sighed, but didn't argue, which meant Elliot had won. For the next 2 hours, Elliot executed the most obvious and obnoxious seduction attempt in human history. He stretched dramatically, draping himself across the couch like a tragic Victorian maiden. He leaned over to grab popcorn that was nowhere near him, just to get all up in Mark's space. He laughed at jokes that weren't funny, flipping his hair like some kind of badly written romance novel protagonist, using all the love-related knowledge he had accumulated from his ghostwriting days. Mark, to Elliot's absolute frustration, did not crack. Mark side-eyed him. Are you okay? No, Elliot muttered. You're supposed to fall madly in love with me and dramatically declare your feelings. Mark scoffed. I think you've had enough dramatics for one night. Chapter 9. Elliot's absolutely foolproof seduction plan. Elliot had written more romance novels than he cared to admit. Billionaire CEOs, brooding princes, enemies to lovers to rivals. He knew seduction, which was why it was infuriating that Mark was resisting him. Resisting might not even be the right word. Mark wasn't rejecting him so much as surviving him, like a man watching a raccoon tip over his trash cans. Still, Elliot was determined. Step 1. The classic reach for the same object maneuver. As Mark bent to grab a box of coffee beans in the back room, Elliot reached too, ensuring their hands had to touch. Sparks. Chemistry. Slow-motion realization. Except Mark stepped aside. Elliot, fully committed, kept reaching anyway, and sent an entire shelf of coffee beans crashing down on himself. Mark stared. Are you okay? I don't know. Elliot wheezed from under 50 pounds of organic beans. But I am helpless and in need of rescue. Mark walked away. Step 2. Feign interest in Mark's hobbies. While Mark made a latte, Elliot leaned against the counter, voice dropping to a sultry drawl. So, tell me about your favorite cinematography techniques. Mark froze. His eyes narrowed. You don't care about cinematography. Sure, I do, Elliot purred, swirling his coffee dramatically. Maybe I just like listening to you talk. Mark squinted, less seduced and more like he was solving a crime. What are you doing? Elliot took a scalding sip of coffee to avoid answering. It burned. He suffered. Suffering was romantic. Final attempt. The casual touch strategy. Outside the cafe, after Mark's shift, Elliot brushed imaginary lint off Mark's sleeve, hand lingering just long enough to be noticed. Mark twitched. Okay, he said, voice tight as he took a very large step backward. I am leaving. And then he fled. Elliot watched him go, frustration bubbling in his chest. For all his expertise, all his romance writing experience, all his flawless execution of these foolproof techniques, he was failing, which could only mean one thing. That maybe Mark wasn't interested, and that, Elliot realized with a sinking feeling, was going to be a problem. Chapter 10. Mark's absolutely horrible, no-good, very bad day. Mark was going to lose his mind. He had held out for as long as he could. He had ignored the weird, lingering touches, sidestepped Elliot's dramatic gestures, and absolutely refused to be drawn into whatever absurd game Elliot was playing. But there was only so much one man could endure. The final straw came when Elliot winked at him. Not a casual, friendly wink. Oh no, this was a slow, dramatic, almost comically exaggerated wink, complete with a smirk that suggested Elliot had practiced it in the mirror. Mark had seen this exact expression in about 10 different romance movie posters. He snapped. What are you doing? Elliot, lounging across a cafe chair like he was posing for the cover of a steamy novel, didn't even blink at Mark's outburst. If anything, his smirk widened. Flirting with you. Mark made a horrible noise in the back of his throat. But why? Elliot looked at him like he was an idiot before he said, because I like you. Dumbass. Mark's brain short-circuited. No, you don't. Mark croaked out, before he cleared his throat and said you're just what? Elliot prompted, leaning forward like he was enjoying this. Mark threw his hands up. You're just being weird. For the first time, Elliot's confidence wavered. The smirk slipped. His brow furrowed slightly. Mark's stomach twisted. And then, because Mark was stupid, he said, You're making fun of me. The silence that followed was immediate and crushing. Elliot's expression shut down so fast that Mark almost regretted saying anything. His shoulders stiffened, his mouth pressed into a thin line. And when he spoke, his voice was too light, too casual. Is that what you think? After all this time? Elliot asked. Mark didn't respond. He couldn't. Elliot let out a short, humorless laugh. Right? Well, good talk, I guess. And then, before Mark could process what was happening, Elliot grabbed his bag and walked out of the cafe. Mark just stood there, feeling like the biggest asshole on the planet. Because for the first time since Elliot had started his ridiculous, over-the-top flirting, Mark realized that maybe, just maybe it hadn't been a joke.